latest podcast in our Thought Leadership series. I'm Jennifer Jones, Director of Consultancy Services at Collingwood, and today I have with me Matt Beeton to discuss the topic of leadership through technological change. Matt is a seasoned executive whose accolades include COO of National Express, MD at Serco, and Group and Global COO at Vicks. He's been awarded and educated at institutions such as Harvard Business School, Cambridge University, the Royal Academy, and Coventry University. Matt now owns APT Business Solutions, and he advises organisations in the public and private sector, both in the UK and abroad. He specialises in transport, smart technology, leadership and business turnaround. He's also about to publish his book, Leadership and Emotional Business, on the importance of emotional and social intelligence in leadership. Good morning, Matt.
Hi, Jennifer.
Thank you for taking the time this morning to talk with us on leadership through technological change. Your subject's already generated quite a lot of interest with TED Talks and the BBC. Your recent talks in Rome and Monte Carlo have been a great success. What was it about this subject that interested you so much?
Well, I guess leadership in general has always fascinated me, even from an early age around sport, especially around the importance of emotional intelligence. But technology is growing so fast now, so exponentially, that it's made leadership fascinating, and it will get more fascinating as leadership evolves. So initially, technology-affected leadership was around communication becoming more electronic. But as you start to work in smart payments and smart cities, I realised the ways in which leadership becomes affected is endless, and that will continue to have a huge impact in leadership as businesses go forward.
So, in your view then, what is the most important characteristic for leaders of the future?
Yeah, it's a real interesting question, and probably one with a lot of answers. But if I was going to whittle it down to four, I'd say, firstly, definitely vision. Given the incremental change, it's a must to have a vision so that you don't stray, so that you don't not see the wood for the trees and get lost in the amount of change that's happening. So the vision needs to be there, it needs to be compelling, and people need to feel excited by it. And ultimately, this will allow leaders to use technology to help reach that vision rather than continue to chase the latest technology just because it's there. And it's easy to do because technology is changing so fast, and it's faster than our ability to keep up with it. So I'd say one is vision. Two is agility. I'm not talking about agility in the technological development sense. I'm talking about it quite literally and generally. It's important for leaders in the fields of change to be agile. The vision is going to set the path, and ultimately, for lots of reasons, there'll be lumps and bumps, peaks and troughs in that path, especially in technology. And the fact is, it's difficult, change is difficult. And even if we're honest, the most agile of leaders fear the unknown. That's just natural. So business agility has to be a key component in tomorrow's leaders. So that's number two. Number three, we have to accept that we're limited. And I guess that's a strange thing to say, but leaders put pressure on themselves to be seen as the guru of everything. And at best, that's just stifling for the company and the individual. But at worst, it's disengaging the team. So giving accountability to staff, creating that open environment, or what I call climate, help them achieve their goals and push that tipping point between developing yourself and others. And paradoxically, that's the thing that's going to help leaders achieve their goal. And if the last one, number four, I would say you have to accept that technology is limited. Again, it's a real strange thing to say because technology is so binary. It's black and white. It literally is ones and zeros. So we could say that artificial intelligence is making that less binary, but that's got a long way to go. And in fact, it learns from human behavior. And there's its limitation. It's not human. It doesn't have a heart. It doesn't have feeling or motivation, and therefore it's flawed. Because those are the three or four things that are the most powerful tools in our toolbox. Yeah, business at the end of the day is all about people. Even in tech companies, it's all about people. So regardless of the changes that are going on around us, not losing that human connection is so important.
Yeah, it's just a limitation, but in a different way, really, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
So how can leaders in business then identify, these great individuals, these leaders of the future from the crowd, these leaders with vision, agility, and acceptance?
Yeah, I guess I'm a little nervous answering that to you guys at Collingwood who do this stuff all the time. But in my own personal view and in my experience, regardless of the skills that you require, I'd always hire for drive and enthusiasm over qualification. Ideally you want both, but those individuals are really few and far between in my experience. However, if somebody has the drive and enthusiasm to make something work in a team, it's really powerful. They're going to learn skills to make things work. And so in the short term, there might be some development needs, but enthusiastic people shine and they stand out and they can always learn stuff. I read somewhere recently that skills are a perishable asset, and as much as 80% of the things that we know today will be out of date in 10 years' time. Mm-hmm. And if that's true, and if leaders want a longer-term sustainable environment, hiring for skills over drive and enthusiasm has got to be counterproductive. So you need to look for those shiny people who have that drive and enthusiasm to make things work.
Yeah, I fully agree with you. It's I heard that there's the children today in school will be getting jobs that just don't even exist at the moment, and yeah. It is about, that's it is not about skills, it is about attitude and hiring with that in mind. So
yeah.
In terms of strategic priority, what do you feel then is the biggest challenge for CEOs of the future, and how, as leaders, do you think they can overcome them in a tech environment?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I guess firstly you have to consider what the scale of change might be. So recently I said in TEDx Monte Carlo that computing power is developing so fast now that it's said to be doubling every 12 to 18 months. If that's true, when we compound that growth curve over 10 years, computing power is going to be 1 million times more powerful than it is today in 10 years' time. So the changes businesses could see in that period in this technological world are hard to comprehend. And that's why business agility is so key, and why hiring the right people with drive and enthusiasm to make that change is so key. Because whether we like it or not, we have to change. Every business does. The world of it isn't broke, so don't fix it doesn't exist anymore. And the evidence is all around us. Recently, in the news, I was reading an interview with the CEO of Nokia. And in the words of their CEO, he said that they didn't do anything wrong, per se. They just didn't continue to develop, and people took their place. And there are always companies that are happy to take a slice of that pie. Even bedroom developers now can take a slice of that pie.
Absolutely.
I also read an interesting stat, actually, Jennifer, a couple of weeks ago, saying that private businesses in the US, their lifespan has gone from 75 years to 15 years. Mm. And tech has played a massive part in that statistic. So if I go back to your question, it's all the things that we've discussed, really. It's setting a vision, continually finding the people with a drive and enthusiasm, making people your asset, not technology, because technology becomes obsolete, life cycles continue to diminish. And CEOs need to be passionate about that change and development and have a clear vision and use technology to achieve that vision, not use it for the sake of using it, really.
So you mentioned there around the pace of change and the need for change, and the fact that it's just a given nowadays. So how would you build innovation into the DNA of a business to allow them to cope with this exponential change and allow that devolved leadership to deal with it day to day?
Yeah, the DNA of a business comes from the people within it and the values that are installed within it. And it sounds amazingly simple to say that. And yet there's vast differences between the culture and speed to market of a company that has those values versus a company that doesn't have those values. creativity comes from feeling safe to try something new. And that can only happen when you have that climate that's open and honest and forward thinking, where people can express themselves personally and professionally without fear or failure or reprimand. So leaders might not be personally responsible for coming up with all that creativity and innovation, but the culture that they instill within an organisation can dictate whether it happens or not. And there are also more practical things like governance. Governance is there to protect a company from risk, but creativity and innovation is hard to crack without a bit of risk. It's new stuff, and therefore it comes with a little risk. But the gains that you can make by taking that risk make the risk seem quite marginal at times. Now, I'm not saying no governance, that would be foolish. A governance model needs to exist, but it needs to change in order to accommodate the speed of business change that we're seeing now. So the key to DNA and innovation is driven by the climate and the culture that the leader instills within the organisation. It needs to be creative and non-threatening, and sometimes you just need to accept that there's more risk associated with change than companies like to admit. And, if we think back, Jennifer, now, and think of some of the most amazing companies in the world, they've all gone through that. They've all gone down that road. Henry Ford went bankrupt before he mastered mass production.
Mm-hmm.
Apple were a computer company before they took on the mobile giants. So the trick here is to make sure it isn't a risk too far and create an open climate, and that should be the DNA.
Yeah, and I fully agree with you there. I mean, a lot of the work that we do is blending that, really, the culture, the DNA with the structure, the governance, and then the strategy in terms of implementing where people want to go. And you're absolutely right, it's the balance and the risk profile to actually do that in a way that leads to success without hopefully leading to Henry Ford and bankruptcy.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the trick of the governance, is to make sure that it's not to make sure that there's no risk altogether, because you'll get nowhere, but to make sure that the risk isn't a risk too far.
Yeah, fully agree. So how can CEOs, bearing in mind that risk, usually, to anybody, when there's a risk like that, to achieving what a company wants to achieve, people want to get more involved, and they tend to then, micromanage, get involved a bit too low down in the organisation. How can CEOs keep a helicopter view and avoid being swept away in all of that, maelstrom of change?
Yeah, and that's a really important point, Jennifer, because being business agile in a more technological world is a busy prospect. And that's where realising your limitations come in, which is one of the 3 or 4 things that I mentioned earlier. The only thing that a CEO will really be able to do in this constant flux of change is keep their eye on the vision and make sure every decision is about achieving that vision. And ultimately, letting go, empowering people to do the things to reach that vision. Having a vision sets your company apart from others. Everybody in that company needs to know what the vision is and what their link is in that chain to achieving it. And I'm not suggesting there that there won't be intense touch points from CEOs, because that's essential. Governance, regular touch points, making sure that everybody's on track is essential. But keeping your finger on the pulse is a key asset of any leader. But ultimately, change can't be managed by one person like it sometimes could in the past, because of the speed of change in this technological world and the diminishing life cycles of technology. Ultimately, that's why I say emotional leadership in these technological leadership positions is more important than ever before, because paradoxically, in a world of increased technology, a CEO has got to nurture those teams to deliver it, because they become more removed from it.
And do you think there's a difference in the UK to global markets, or are these successful leadership behaviours generic?
Yeah, that's a real interesting subject, and I've thought about that a lot. I was thinking about that writing the book, and on a personal leadership side, I truly believe that it's generic, because it's the kind of leadership style that is the most basic of our human needs. It's the stuff that's in Maslow's hierarchy of needs. The leaders that give people self-esteem and confidence are leaders that motivate. And it's not just true in business, you see it in sport and in performing arts, and cooking, you see it in everything. If your self-esteem and confidence is nurtured, your motivation can go through the roof. Now, that's not to say that there are other forms of leadership don't work in different situations or cultures, but in my view, that's not sustainable. A dictatorial leadership style can probably work in a turnaround situation, but it's not empowering. And, faced with a world that's changing, an organisation that isn't empowered will be lacking, in my view, in the face of competition.
And in terms of long-term sustainability, I'm sure.
Yeah, and there'll be some subtleties and variables, I'm sure, but, the two things at the foundation of this are an empowering leadership style touches our hot buttons as humans, and therefore it's motivating. And the advancements in technology now that mean that our companies, our markets and economies around the world will change whether we like it or not, and therefore we need to continually evolve.
So let's move this on to you a little bit more. What leadership strategies have worked for you personally in the past that you feel will be even more useful in the future?
Yeah, I guess like everybody else, the things that have really touched me and the things that I will take forward are born out of the experiences that I've had, and I've had a couple of real sweet spots in my career. And one was my first job at Rolls-Royce, where I learned about emotional leadership from my first boss, a guy called Mark King. And he took a chance on me being a director in the business after 6 months of graduating. And I so wasn't ready for it, Jennifer. I struggled for the first few months, but he believed in me so much and trusted in me that it gave me a drive that he couldn't have got out of me in any other way. And, he was the kind of guy that people would pull overnighters for to not let Mark down. He was an amazing guy. He continues to be a friend after 20 years, and that was my first experience in the working world, really. And the second one was in a railway company here in the north of England. My boss was a lady called Heidi Mottram, who you may know, and she was a real people person, and she gave me the latitude to manage the team how I wanted. And so when I met the team, I nurtured the doers like Mark King had taught us to do at Rolls-Royce. And the results were huge. I had a PA called Kath who used to do things for the team, not because she had to, but because she could. I had a head of stations who was my right-hand lady called Catherine, who taught me more about connection with the team that I could have dreamt of. I had a head of stations called Paul, who was a life and soul of the party, but also very skilled in a specialist role. And bringing that all together with a vision, acting as a team, was really powerful. So having seen those sweet spots, this, for me, is the strategy that works. So everything that I do now will be all about visioning. It will be all about empowerment. It will be all about creating that climate and making sure that, we are a team, not just call ourselves a team. And people call themselves a team so easy these days, but, there's a big difference between feeling like you're part of a team and then just feeling like you're somebody in a team.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a big difference between a group and a team, isn't there? And it's
yeah, absolutely.
It's interesting there that your leadership strategies, all of your examples you mentioned there, were all about relationships, and all about the need now that it's not about the task that you're doing. It's about how well you collaborate and influence and create those relationships to actually get the job done.
Yes, absolutely.
So what strategies and behaviours do you want to leave behind? What behaviours have got you this far, but you don't feel now will serve you well in the future?
Again, it's a real good question. One thing I do less of now is procrastinate about the plan Bs and plan Cs. And early on in the career, I guess there was a need to do that, to understand what risks were, etc. But I don't plan Bs and plan Cs anymore. I don't look for evidence upon evidence upon evidence to move something forward, because I've seen it stall progress, and sometimes I've seen companies that have started behind the curve because they've done that, and it's a hard trend to spot, really, because it's a balance. So now I look for evidence, how something will help achieve a vision, and then I get cracking. For me now, plan Bs are an excuse not to achieve your plan A when you can control all the variables, clearly. Plan B should only be put in place when the variables you can't control outnumber the ones that you can. So, I procrastinate a lot less now. And with the rate of changes that business is seeing, that's going to become more important into the future, and something that I'll continue to work on.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I mean, we've done a bit of work here around VUCA and volatility, uncertainty, complexity, ambiguity, and how can CEOs use an appreciation of VUCA to lead their organisations through change? What leadership characteristics will be critical in your opinion?
Yeah, and again, this is where business agility is so important, especially in times of rapid macro changes. The ability to not procrastinate due to the unknown and actually embrace change and manage within that chaos is absolutely critical. And it takes a growth mindset, for sure, and a team of driven individuals who are every bit as much about the team as they are about themselves. But it's an ethos of constant change. It's an appreciation that the world that we live in now is going to change. So you need a vision so that you don't get lost in that chaos. And that's going to be the key to successful leadership in a technological age.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's been a thread, obviously, through our chat this morning, hasn't it, really?
Yeah.
So finally then, I suppose, what's been your biggest leadership lesson?
For me, definitely, it's the tipping point between working ridiculously hard to prove myself individually to the point in which I found power in everybody else. And I know that sounds crazy. It'll sound crazy to people listening to this podcast, because I know teams win football, not individual players. I know that teams win bike races, not individuals. I know that Richard Branson doesn't fly his own 747s over the Atlantic. It's obvious stuff. Yet, when it's about yourself, sometimes it takes a real-life situation to make the penny drop when it should be obvious. And I was lucky enough to experience some great high-performance teams and how that collective achievement works really well, rather than working extremely hard on your own success. So, and when you lead those teams yourself, it proves that theory even more. So the biggest lesson for me really was going from me to we, if you like.
That's absolutely great. Thank you, Matt, for all your insights and for providing additional thoughts around leadership through technological change. If any listeners would like to obtain